there's a lot of games out there that I love. Usually on this channel, I talk about mostly positive experiences that I had with games growing up or playing them retrospectively as an adult. But today we're going to be talking about a game that I genuinely hate. Like, just the when somebody says the name of it, somebody shows a picture of it, it brings my piss to a boil. It is a game called Quest 64. Now, let's go back in time, shall we? Young RGT, who was RPG85 at the time, was a fan of RPG games. I would go over to my best friend Pecker Dupree's house. He had a PlayStation 1. We would play games like Final Fantasy VII. We would play games like Grand Stream Saga. We would play games like Brigandine. If you wanted a strategy RPG, there was a million on the PlayStation 1. You wanted an action RPG, there was a million on PlayStation 1. You wanted a turn-based RPG, there was a million on PlayStation 1. The N64, however, great system, great library of games. But if you wanted to play an RPG game, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. There was nothing. There was nothing. And you're feverishly typing Ogre Battle 64, man. Why didn't you talk about it? Because Ogre Battle 64 was not out at the time that I'm talking about. I'm talking about a specific time period, and Ogre Battle 64 is literally one game. Don't you dare type Ocarina of Time in the comments section down below, because if you do, I hope your fingers fall off. Ocarina of Time is an action game with some RPG elements. It's not an action RPG, it is an action game with RPG elements. It's an adventure game with RPG elements, not an RPG. So then I'm flipping through Nintendo Power. Yo, there's an RPG coming to the N64, Quest 64, an exclusive being published by THQ. I love THQ. THQ had just given me WCW versus NWO World Tour. Fantastic game. Not the best wrestling game on the N64, but still a very fun experience. And then I rented Quest 64. And this was a game that literally I rented it. It was like a 2-night rental. I popped it into my N64. I played it for like an hour, and I said, never again. Where do we start with this game, Quest 64? Let's start at the story of the game. Let's start at the main character of the game. Now, when you talk about RPGs, you usually get cool names for characters. You get interesting, exotic names for characters. What is the name? Look at like freaking Final Fantasy VII. All right, take that for instance. Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Sephiroth. Cool names. Names like, whoa, that's a badass name. What is the name of the lead character in Quest 64? Brian. B-R-I-A-N. Brian is not someone going on an exotic quest. Brian is not going on a mythical adventure in a world. Brian is selling you a Lucy cigarette outside of the gas station for 50 cents a pop. Brian is drinking a malt 40 ounce outside of that gas station as well. Brian, my stepdad is named Brian. He would never go on a mythical adventure unless you count mythical adventures through the streets of Brooklyn in the 80s, which, I mean, with the drugs back then, it could have been a bit of a mythical adventure. But Brian is trying to find his father who's been kidnapped. Riveting. And then you look at the game. You see these chunky polygons, and that, that's fine. N64 games did have some chunky polygons. PS1 games had some chunky polygons. I don't think that's a bad artistic style, but the blur in this game, N64 games are known for potentially being blurry. I feel like the blur in this game is just on a whole nother level. It is absolutely ridiculous how blurry this game actually was playing on a CRT. Now you could play it, on an N64 emulator or something and clean it up, but the initial experience was horrible. Everything about this game just looked horrible. The enemies were absolutely stupid. Different sorts of enemies. The dialogue that you had between characters was paper thin. This is supposed to be an RPG. You have the opportunity to make the first traditional RPG on the N64. One of the biggest flaws of the system, Square leaving Nintendo over the whole cartridge-based medium. You could swoop in and freaking take over, but instead you just take a shit all over RPG fans. And then, my God in heaven, you get to the combat. You get to the first and foremost, the combat of this game, that the enemy AI is atrocious. It is all over the place. Some enemies are super simple. Some enemies are super hard. There's no rhyme or reason or consistency with any of that. And then you get to the combat system. Is it a turn-based it's a fucking, they put like some like square hexagon on the map, and then you're just mashing A and you're casting these crappy spells, and that's it. There's your combat. There's really no sort of exploration because there's not many places to go and explore. There's just nothing. There's nothing. But it was heralded as the first Nintendo 64 RPG. So everyone was going to play it because N64 owners wanted RPG games. There's always going to be role-playing game fans of any system, of any age, of any sort of thing like that. And that's what N64 owners got. Quest 64. There are games like Virtual Hydlide is the worst game of all time. And we'll talk about Virtual Hydlide on the Sega Saturn one day. How that game is not crucified on a daily basis is ridiculous. But at least with Virtual Hydlide, that was a Sega Saturn game. So it being a Sega Saturn game, you still had other great RPGs on the Sega Saturn. There were tons of them. And with the N64, however, there wasn't tons of them. There weren't. You couldn't play, Quest 64 and then move on to a better RPG. With Virtual Hydlide, okay, whatever. The game sucks. Fine. You move on. You go to another game. I hate Quest 64. There's a Twitter account that's dedicated to Quest 64 and share memes and stuff like that. And I hate that son of a bitch. I told him in a tweet. I was like, I hate you. I hate your account. I mean, I follow him just for the lulz, but yeah. Quest 64, if you have any sort of inkling to play this game, don't. There's no reason to. There's no reason to reminisce about this game. If you have nostalgia for this game, I would recommend calling. It's obviously too late, but you should probably call CPS on your parents because your parents did not care about you. If your parents bought you Quest 64, they did not care about the well-being of their child. And that to me is a sin. It's a sin. Quest 64, may you burn in the fires of hell forever. Brian from Quest 64, may you burn in the fires of hell forever. There was also a Game Boy game too. I never played it though. Let me know if you have any fond memories of Quest 64 in the comments section down below. And if you do, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And as always, thank you for tuning in to RGT85 Stash. It was fun. This was therapeutic for me to get this off my chest finally. I feel like I've been holding this inside for quite a while now. I hate Quest 64. I hate it. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.